The standard exception class is specifically designed to declare objects to be thrown as exceptions. The exception class has a virtual function called what that returns a C string, and this function can be overloaded in derived classes to provide a description of your exception. So here I have a working copy of exception.cpp from chapter 10 of the exercise files, and I have a function called broken that does nothing but throw an exception. And so when I call that, you'll notice that it just brings up the debugger and it gives me an error, and it all looks very, very catastrophic. And so if we have an error condition inside one of our classes that we're writing, we probably don't want that to happen. So I'm going to show you how to catch an exception and how to create your own exception class. So first of all, we want to catch this exception. And so instead of calling broken directly, we're going to call it from inside of a try loop, right? So I'm going to try and I'm going to call broken inside of there, and I'm going to catch the standard exception class because that's what I'm throwing. And so I say exception ampersand E. I want to use a reference here. And I just see out, this can't be good, and E dot what, and that'll tell me what happened. And so now when I build and run, instead of bringing up my debugger and everything, I get a nice useful message. This can't be good. And well, the message isn't that useful because I'm using the standard exception class. If I want a useful message, I'm going to have to write my own exception class, which is actually really, really easy to do because I can inherit from the standard exception class. So I say class, and I'm going to call it a capital E, and I'm going to inherit from the standard exception class, right? And I'm going to have a place for a message, and I'm going to build a constructor that allows me to pass a message. So you'll notice that I have this throw modifier here for my constructor. That's used very rarely, but it's used in places where you absolutely positively know that you're not going to be throwing an exception. And this is one of those places. All this constructor does is it copies this message over, and I'm going to use it again for my what, which is overloading the virtual function called what in the standard exception class. And again, I have this throw modifier. And just one more thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a private constructor for the default constructor so that this class cannot be constructed without that string. And so that will look like this. All right, now I just want to throw one of my clever little exceptions instead. And I'll need to catch that instead of the standard exception. So that just looks like that. And now when I build and run, it says this can't be good, this function is broken. And so it passed this message, this function is broken, to the exception, and when I catch it, I can get that through the eWhat method. So this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. Now this is very convenient, and now I can have exceptions with error messages, but it's not actually very scalable, because if you have a large system, you could end up with a mess of different error messages. So instead, there's a really easy solution to this. I can actually define some constants of my exception class that can then be passed as thrown exceptions. So I can say const E, I'll call this one E ouch, and I can have another one, call this one bad, but you can call these whatever you want. These can be your standard errors for the classes that you write. Those all look like really useful error messages. And so now instead of throwing E, I can throw E ouch. And when I build and run, then it says ouch, or I can throw E worse. And it'll say don't do that. So C++ exceptions provide a simple and effective way of handling errors and other exceptional circumstances at runtime. The standard exception class is well suited for deriving objects that you can throw as exceptions for a variety of uses. Now we'll delete our working copy and run clean to prepare for the next lesson.